We work ourselves to the bone to make sure that we have a product that no one else can achieve. We have a very clear vision in our heads of what we want, and we will not stop until we get it.
Wow, that was very serious. It got a little dark at the end. We will stop at nothing.
One of our philosophies as a team since sort of day one has been, we've really have had this sort of startup mentality.
I always think of like the Guerrilla radio Rage Against the Machine song when I think about us, because it's kind of like we don't go out with a big production crew. We don't necessarily have producers go and schedule or coordinate big shoots for us. We just go out and kind of sneakily and stealthily find ways to record really awesome material.
There's some benefits you get out of working that way. If you're, for example, a weapon shoot, if you're going to go do a weapon shoot, and a lot of teams in the industry will hire an armorer and a recordist, and you go to a gun range, so you feel like you have to do it right, and so you sort of play it safe.
That sounds awesome.
For World War II, our historical advisor, Marty Morgan, owned all of these weapons, so rather than do the sort of the standard weapon shoot, we just went to Marty's house. Because of that, you feel like you can take a lot more risk. And a lot of the stuff, we get back to the studio and it totally didn't work, right? And it totally sucked. But sometimes we'll stumble onto really awesome things that we probably wouldn't have gotten if we played it safe.
All right, let's just see what happens. This will be a run through. So one of the best experiences I've ever had was, and I've gone on a couple of these now, is to go on these firearm recording trips with the crew. By far, my favorite weapon was the M1 Garand. It's massive, it's so heavy, and it's so accurate. Not to mention the sound quality of it is phenomenal. Because it was my very first time ever shooting a firearm, Marty gave me a bet for every time that I hit the target, he would give me $1. And I think I got like $4 or $5 out of it. So yeah, that was, I think it has 8 rounds, right? 8. Okay. Yeah, so that was a really cool experience.
Our very first shoot for Modern 3, that was a session where we had hired these professional recorders, right? And we didn't shoot the guns all day long, but we listened to them and we got close and we checked it out. But it wasn't until I actually fired that first gun holding it when I went, wow, these things sound completely different when you're firing them than when you're listening to them. That was kind of one of the philosophies. Our guns weren't just recordings of the weapons. We would enhance them to make them sound as if it was on your body, right? So you have the kind of the thump in your body as much as the sound of the gun.
A big part of the philosophy of SHG Audio is really experiencing the sound and not just hearing the sound, because that informs our sound design and that informs the way that we create the sounds, and thus also informing like the player experience through our sounds.
There's this myth, I think, with sound designers that we always know exactly what's going to work. You know what I mean? Like you have a task and you're like, I know what I can record for this. We do that, we experiment, right? And half of them fail.
90% of
90, well, I'm better. At failing. So a lot of times it's like that, 100th record, or it might be a recording you've done before that you like, that you're like, oh, maybe I'll try it in this other recording that I did. We don't do a ton of planning. I know that sounds bad, but I mean, sometimes we do. The larger records, we'll do planning. I know, he's laughing at me right now. But it's more like, okay, so I really need this thing. Let's go to the woods now. You know, let's just drop everything and go. Get up that hill!
So tree bursts are, the Germans artillery would come in and it would explode. It would be timed so it would explode, not when it hit the ground, but above the ground. And the idea was it would cause the trees to burst and send tree shrapnel everywhere. So we needed the sound of, you know, trees tearing apart. And so we went out to the forest nearby here. Kaisley and I, we picked up a bunch of sort of branches and logs, and we took a sledgehammer and we would lay them out, and then we would just swing the sledgehammer and smash the branches, and they would break and crack and fly, you know, send sort of bits of wood everywhere, and sounded awesome. I think there's another time actually I was out hiking with my son in a forest, and we found this huge, like a redwood tree had fallen onto another, and it had broken it open and sort of splintered huge like log-sized chunks of redwood tree. And so my son and I were out there ripping chunks of this redwood tree down and take all those bits and Kaisley would work his magic on them. We don't like to record Foley inside Foley studios. We did some experimentation with that, and we never thought it sounded real enough or correct enough. And so a lot of our Foley we record on location. So we were trying to find like a blown out building. Above the Golden Gate Bridge, there's old like gun emplacements, which were these huge like concrete rooms up on the side of the mountain above the Golden Gate Bridge. And so the first time we went there, it was for advanced warfare, and we were looking for, in the Detroit level, you're kind of walking through a school and there's like, you're crunching on glass and broken stuff, and it's just like trash and it's kind of echoey in the school. And so we went up there and we found this room that was just frightening. We were like grabbing handfuls of rock and there were bottles and stuff around. I had like my combat boots on. Kaisley was, you know, kind of blindly following me in the dark. And we were just like sort of crunching around in this room and making footstep sounds. And they just turned out, they were amazing.
Just the natural reflection is you can't beat that, right?
I was actually driving to work and I saw that there was going to be an air show with World War II bombers. I was like, great, this is the perfect opportunity. So I called the airport where it was going to take place and asked if I could get out on the runway, and they said absolutely not. And so then we had to, okay, let's think outside the box. Let's think how we're going to get this. And so we were sort of looking around on some maps, and I saw that there was a golf course right at the end of the runway, and like hole 3 was like literally right where they would be taking off. And so a couple of us went out and bought a round of golf for the day, and this is the bag, and literally put like our recorders in the golf bag with the clubs, and drove out to hole 3, and we literally played hole 3 all day long, and we would just be putting along and yeah, just couldn't sing that putt, and letting people play through, and we'd just like be chipping away, and then we'd see this bomber like come out on the runway, and we'd throw the clubs, you know, down and get the recorders out and run up and record, and it was amazing, right? It was all day. It was like bomber after bomber. We got all these flybys and takeoffs and landings. It was awesome.
I think the pure amount of recording we actually do is significantly more than what a lot of other audio teams do. Because I think there are a lot of teams in the industry, to no fault to their own, right, who rely a lot on sample libraries and licensed libraries. And we do that as rarely as possible. And the amount of field recording we do compared to stories that I hear from some of my other friends and colleagues in the industry just seems significantly more on this team than anywhere else.
There's plenty of times on the weekend where I'll be doing something and I'll just have my recorder with me, and something will happen and I'll have to record it, at least for an idea, if not for actual source. But it's like we never stop thinking about possible recording opportunities. We're always thinking about what we could contribute. Watch your head!
I was supposed to come up with the Walker tank, and I was totally struggling with it. I didn't know, like, everything I tried wasn't working, and I was just sort of frustrated because I had the sound in my head. I just didn't know how to make it happen. And one night I was sleeping, and I totally had my recorder on my bedside table, and I went to sleep, and I woke up, and I heard the Walker tank. Like, I heard the sound that was in my head. I was like, oh my gosh, it's like outside somewhere. And so I grabbed my recorder and ran outside, and it was my garbage truck. And the garbage truck had this huge arm, and it was like, you know, and it was like on this chain, like, system thing with hydraulics, and it would grab the cans and ratchet them up and dump them and bring it down and drop it and open up. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is perfect. There were so many interesting little bits to this. And so I ran up and knocked on the door of the garbage truck driver. I was like, hey, can I follow you around to record this? And he was like, yeah, sure. And so I followed him around for like 100 houses through my neighborhood with my recorder with this guy right here, and just recorded all these great sounds. And that was it. Like, I came back and I was like, dude, Hazley, listen to this, right? And we fired it up and in my room, and like just alone, just raw recordings were so cool.
I was tasked with making the sound for the drones. And one in particular, a little drone in the level where, you know, you're sneaking around. I tried a bunch of things, but ended up with a couple of neat elements for the engine of the drone. And one of them was a beard trimmer, obviously processed, but very basic sound. And then I also recorded a little handheld fan, and then like together the two of those kind of made the sort of engine.
You should like put tape on it, to like tape on the fan. Or
yeah.
Like that, just to make it more flippy.
Exactly. So if you put tape on the blades of the little fan, it has a nice buzz. It kind of purrs. Remember the recording we did when we went to the optometrist?
Oh yeah.
So because I wanted to also give the drone these like almost like the sound of like lenses shifting, like it was. I mean, there was no actual animation for it, but I thought it'd be kind of a cool little clicky
because it was a
sound.
security. It was trying to like film you.
It was trying to find you, right? And so Don and I went to an optometrist and recorded all their equipment, and so there's some of that layered in there too. It's kind of cool.
If you've never seen a tank in real life, if you've never climbed in one and were able to like shut and lock the hatch, it's a little fun. I remember we were in one of the APCs and we opened up all the hatches and Dave's on one side, I'm on the other. We were going really fast off-road and the driver just like hits the trench brake and just 90-degree pivots and turns, and I just remember falling and going straight into Dave, like full. I don't know if you remember that, Dave.
Yeah. It's permanently ingrained into my memory.
Those tanks, they grip off-road, and when they turn, we were hanging out the side of the tank. You have bruises all over your ribs. Everyone had a point. Like I had the right tread, Dave had the left tread, Grim had the exhaust. You know, everyone had a specific location to record on the tank as it's hauling on this open field.
Dave and I were running next to trying to get the treads, and we kept going and running, and that was back when I was, you know, younger and healthier. But this guy was like, you know, just chasing these things constantly. I was wearing flip-flops, and it was it was literally like 95, 100 degrees out, and it just went back and forth, and it's really exhausting.
One interesting thing is about, you know, this sort of contrasting science fiction versus reality is that, you know, conventional wisdom would suggest that science fiction is, you know, it's more liberating and like harder to do. You know, it's a little more difficult to come up with those sounds, but you have all this freedom and it's so much fun. And that realism has got to be obviously kind of boring because it's just realism. But it's actually, I find that it's almost the opposite. When we record something, it doesn't really sound great by itself. You know, it's going to need some work to ultimately become a sound.
Me out of that! Clear the tanks! Panzers!
very, very true of reality. So we actually have to invent reality. It's almost like more of an achievement because it's so difficult.
Yeah, you have to take your source and invent reality, but you also have to enhance it, but with enough restraint to make it believable to not only us, but the average listener. And at least for me, you just absolutely know when you've hit that. It's not like, maybe this might be the ballpark. For me, it's like, okay, that's it. Like, I can put this in the game, it's done.
Particularly with a historical game, I mean, there was some pressure, we felt it as a team, a sense of making sure that things were accurate. We were dealing with World War II, and that's there's sort of a reverence to World War II, and we wanted to make sure that every part of that was accurate. And at the same time, it's hard to find those things to record, right? There's not a lot of those planes or those tanks like functioning. It was a lot of work to just find the source to actually record.
It's Perez!
We wanted the tank in the game to have a very unique sound and almost like a character, almost like it was an animal. So I was doing some research trying to find some different YouTube videos of similar engines that the tanks would have used. And I find a video of a dude who, you can't really tell what's going on at first, but he has an engine on a block and he's firing it up and everyone has hearing protection on because it's just loud. And I immediately sent it to Dave. And I'm like,
well, you're like, this is it. This is our engine.
I'm like, this is what the tank should sound like.
How are we going to get this engine?
Your detective work
took over. So I thought, well, why don't we just try to find that dude and that engine? So I emailed him and I was just like, can we come? We saw this video. Your engine's awesome. We totally want to record it. Would that be okay? It took a while, but eventually he warmed up and we went out to his place and met him. And fast forward like 3 weeks and we're all standing there with our mics in the exact same place, exact same engine, only we were recording it, and it turned out it was great. We could sort of play the engine like an instrument. I remember just almost conducting it, right? Where I was like doing this with my hand and he was just sort of following me and revving the engine exactly how we needed it to do. And the same thing, I remember like being there and he would like crank the engine in a certain way and we'd all look at each other like, oh my gosh, do that again, that sounds so good.
Yeah, we have this thing that's the Casely O, because Casely always gets stuck in recordings where he's like, that sounds really good, and we're like, Casely, stop it, shut up.
Not true, not true.
Hold on! Race 2-3, we're hit! We're hit!
After our first game as a studio, we were trying to determine what our sound was. Like, we wanted a sound for Sledgehammer. We didn't want to be generic. We wanted to be super unique. And so there was a time actually where we sat down and we listened to every great sounding thing we could get our hands on. We started to like narrow down and pick out, this is the aesthetics that we like. These are the things that we think sound really cool. And we started to hone in on what we wanted the Sledgehammer sound to be. One of the coolest compliments I got was hearing people talk about our game saying, oh, yeah, that sounds like a Sledgehammer game. And I was like, awesome, there's a unique enough sound that people say that it sounds like a Sledgehammer game.